going?
Well, we're headed towards more pesticide use, for one thing. That's pretty clear. At the last superweed hearing, one of the weed scientists spoke on the order of 70% increase in 2,4-D and dicamba use soon after the introduction of the 2,4-D and dicamba-resistant soybeans.
So what happens then?
Well, one thing is you have greater levels of these residues of these herbicides on the crop. And a little known fact about herbicide-resistant crops is that the companies seek increases in what are called tolerances, or maximum allowable residues of the pesticide on the crop. And we've seen that repeatedly with Roundup Ready, greatly increased glyphosate tolerances each time a new Roundup Ready crop is approved. Now, it's very troublesome when we think about that with more toxic herbicides like 2,4-D and dicamba, both of which have been linked to cancer in pesticide applicators and farmers. 2,4-D is a likely endocrine disruptor. That's disruptor of our hormone systems, which are so important in controlling our development, our reproductive systems, our metabolism. EPA was supposed to start looking at endocrine effects of all of our pesticides in 1998, but hasn't been funded to do that, and so is only just now getting started.
Well, are there any weed scientists who recommend an approach other than Monsanto's preference for dealing with weed resistance to their product Roundup?
Could you restate that?
Yeah, is there another approach that weed scientists would recommend to dealing with this problem of resistance?
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, it's quite interesting because there's a technique that's long been used by organic growers, but also conventional growers, and involves planting winter cover crops. And basically, it means after you harvest the main crop, you can plant a cereal like rye or a legume like hairy vetch or clover. And this cover crop grows in the fall and then more in the spring. And it holds the soil, and it also absorbs excess nitrogen and phosphorus fertilizer. And then in the spring, it's killed off and forms a thick mat into which you can plant your main crop. And that mat suppresses weeds physically. Sometimes the cover crop also releases chemicals that inhibit the growth of weeds. It's a very, very beneficial practice because, again, it effectively suppresses weeds and provides multiple other benefits as well.
I want to thank you for answering that. Did you want to add something, Mr. Groom?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So we've delved into a lot of detail, but one important broad category of differentiation among weed control with regard to crop protection products is whether the chemistry is used after the weeds emerge and are sprayed onto the weeds, or it's applied to the soil as a pre-emergent control product. The ALS herbicides that Mr. Freeze is talking about are pre-emergence products. They're applied to the soil before the crop is planted. And so while the registrants for those chemicals that are pre-emergent products oftentimes do have protective tolerance levels should some tiny amount be left in the soil and then get into the crop plant. There's virtually no evidence of residual in the actual crop from those kinds of products that are applied by the farmers. So big difference there between the technologies. All herbicides aren't applied the same way. And again, I think we come back to the industry, farmers, USDA and Extension are all looking at redeploying a lot of old technologies. With regard to dicamba, I'm certain that Monsanto and others have already reinvented some of the formulation technologies so that drift can be better managed than it was when that particular product was more prominently used. And so it's all part of the solution, and I think what you're drawing out here is that we all have to work together and reinvent old products because we also have evidence, and I've got a study here that I'd also like to ask you to consider submitting to the record by
you can submit it. So
Phillips McDougall organization that shows that in the decade of the 80s and 90s, our crop protection companies were able to discover and bring to market more than 50 new herbicide products in the decade of the 2000s. That number's dropped to 38. And so it's just a reminder that while our research goes on, we found the easy to discover and most broad spectrum efficacious herbicides, and now we're looking for things that are much more targeted, and the need to reinvent some of the older products that are proven and safe but can be reformulated and applied by farmers in different ways. Thank you.
Thank you very much. But to say in response to the point that you raised, something that's obvious, that we're really probing here into cause and effect.
Mm-hmm.
Some causal chains begin in nature. With biotechnology, genetic engineering, some causal chains begin in the laboratory. So we just are trying to find out which way things are going here, doing the best we can.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. I want to thank each of the witnesses. You've given this subcommittee additional information. We'll continue to seek more. We're going to do it in a dispassionate way. I'll just try to gather information so that we can recommend policies that would be in the best interest of all parties concerned. I do take note of Mr. Miller's testimony that government does have a role to play. It's not only the industry that's at question here, and I appreciate that you raised that. So, without any further testimony, this is the Domestic Policy Subcommittee of Oversight and Government Reform. The subject of today's hearing are superweeds and outgrowth of USDA biotech policy. This is the second part of this hearing. The subcommittee will continue to retain jurisdiction over this matter. I want to thank the staff for its presence here today and its participation in helping to structure this hearing. There being no, and thank the witnesses certainly, there being no further business before this subcommittee stands adjourned. Thank you.